It's Wednesday, 16 October. Welcome to the President's Daily Brief. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. All right, let's get briefed. Coming up on today's show, we're learning new details about North Korean troops fighting alongside Russian forces in Ukraine, with some sources suggesting that Kim Jong-un may have sent his pal Putin as many as 10,000 troops. Now, that's on top of all the ammunition and missiles and other hardware that Kim has been providing to Moscow over the past couple of years. Later in the show, the Biden administration is once again butting heads with the Israeli government, reportedly delivering an ultimatum, threatening to withhold military aid unless humanitarian conditions in Gaza improve within 30 days. Oh, well, maybe, just maybe, the Biden-Harris administration should also be butting heads with Hamas while they're at it. The Iranian-backed group that started this whole conflict, of course, still holds sway in much of Gaza in terms of aid distribution. But, well, I suppose you wouldn't want to upset your Arab American voters this close to the U.S. election. All right. Plus, a new report from Microsoft uncovers a growing alliance between Russia, China, and Iran using criminal networks to ramp up their cyberespionage and hacking operations. And in today's Back of the Brief, an internal Border Patrol memo reveals that nearly, get this, 1/3 of surveillance cameras along the U.S.-Mexico border are non-functioning, severely impacting, as you might guess, border security. Correct. According to reports, 33% of the cameras along the border aren't working. But first, today's PDB Spotlight. New details are emerging about the cooperation between Russia and the North Korean regime. Kim Jong-un, well, he appears to be all in on helping Vladimir Putin wage his war on Ukraine. Ukrainian President Zelensky sounded the alarm on the deepening alliance between Moscow and Pyongyang during his daily video message on Sunday, warning that North Korea is increasingly sending their own soldiers to fight alongside the Russian military. That, of course, is in addition to the stockpiles of weapons and munitions that they've been providing to the Kremlin for the past 2 years, and that's according to a report from CNN. Now, while we know that North Korea sent a small number of troops from their engineering brigade earlier this summer to help Russian forces with military construction projects, that was in eastern Ukraine, it appears that Zelensky was warning about a significant expansion of North Korea's participation in the conflict. Zelensky said, quote, "It's no longer just about transferring weapons. It's actually about transferring people from North Korea to the occupying military forces," end quote. So, how many people are we talking about here? According to a Western diplomat speaking exclusively to the Kyiv Independent on Tuesday, the number could be as high as 10,000. Now, if true, and I want to stress the word if, that would represent a staggering commitment from Pyongyang and signal that the two belligerent powers, of course, are deeply committed to their alliance. The unnamed Western diplomat stressed that it was unclear what kind of soldiers are being sent and what their official role would be. We should also note that Ukraine's foreign ministry declined to comment on the claim. But specific numbers aside, both South Korean intelligence and Western military analysts have confirmed the presence of North Korean soldiers inside Ukraine. Just last week, South Korean officials said reports indicated that 6 North Korean military officers were killed in a Ukrainian missile strike in the Russian-occupied Donetsk region at the beginning of October. With tensions rising on the Korean peninsula, officials in Seoul said that the Hermit Kingdom is keen to give their commanders and soldiers real-world battlefield experience, and, of course, Ukraine offers that opportunity. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War, well, they agree. A recent assessment published by the think tank on the 11th of October quotes a Ukrainian official as saying that at least, quote, several thousand North Korean infantry personnel are currently training inside Russia and could be deployed to the front lines inside Ukraine by the end of this year. For Russia, which is running short on manpower as the fighting grinds on, The added troops would significantly bolster their frontline force. But it's also, frankly, an embarrassing commentary on Russia's supposed military prowess. John Foreman, the UK's former defense attaché in Moscow, told the Kyiv Independent, quote, "It's a clear indicator how far Russia and its military have fallen over the last 2.5 years that it's having to beg, borrow, and buy support from North Korea," end quote. As a reminder, Russia and North Korea began to rapidly deepen their ties in the wake of the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine back in February of 2022, as Moscow had to obviously increasingly rely on North Korea to restock their dwindling missile supplies. The Kremlin has in turn traded oil with North Korea to help them bypass international sanctions, while also, and this is an important point, providing technological assistance regarding their spy satellite and nuclear programs. Yeah, I don't see how that could go wrong for the international community. These dealings culminated in the signing of a landmark mutual defense pact, and that was in June. It's worth noting that in addition to the extensive military assistance of North Korea, Russia is receiving drones and missiles from Iran, and recent reports suggest that they may also be receiving advanced drones from China, which has been providing economic support for Moscow ever since the war began. As the war further isolates Russia, it does appear that Putin is being kept afloat by his comrades in the evil League of Evil. All right, coming up after the break, the Biden administration reportedly issues an ultimatum to Israel over Gaza. And a new Microsoft report reveals that Russia, China, and Iran are teaming up with criminal networks to escalate cyberespionage. I'll have those stories when we come back. Welcome back to the PDB. I want to return to our coverage of the apparent disagreements and growing daylight between Israel and the Biden-Harris administration, as the White House issues a new ultimatum, reportedly, to leaders in Jerusalem. In a letter sent to Israel's top brass earlier this week, the Biden-Harris administration threatened to cut off military assistance if Israel does not take steps to improve the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. The letter, signed by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, gives Israel just 30 days to provide concrete assurances that aid shipments can resume in the enclave unimpeded. And that's according to a report from the New York Post. The threat to pause the delivery of U.S. weapons comes after months of escalating criticisms from President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and senior White House officials over Israel's handling of the humanitarian situation in Gaza. They say the number of trucks entering the enclave has significantly declined since April, leading to accusations that Israel was planning to implement a, quote, starvation plan in Gaza by blocking off access to key crossings. Israeli Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant assured Austin on a call on Sunday that there was no truth to those reports and said that aid shipments were resuming after a brief pause earlier this month due to intense fighting with Hamas that have reemerged in northern Gaza. Still, despite the challenges that Israel is grappling with regarding Hamas, the White House is opting for a pressure campaign. I'm sure domestic politics has nothing to do with that. They outlined specific areas of focus, saying Israel must increase humanitarian aid supplies by the winter, establish a new delivery route through Jordan, and end the current state of isolation in northern Gaza, where Hamas is still highly active. Additionally, Israel must allow at least 350 aid trucks to enter the Strip daily along all 4 border crossings. Failure to adhere to these demands could trigger the threatened pause in military aid, with the Biden administration citing U.S. policy requiring recipients of foreign aid to adhere to international laws of war. But Gallant and other Israeli leaders have consistently pushed back on criticisms that they are impeding aid into Gaza, reminding their U.S. counterparts that they still are fighting pockets of Hamas militants across the enclave who attempt to steal supplies and leverage them to maintain some semblance of power over the civilian population. Gallant noted that Hamas still has extensive ties to the private sector in Gaza and that the group's relationship with local merchants handling aid must be monitored to ensure that Hamas cannot reconstitute while Israel's attention is focused on Hezbollah in Lebanon. The 30-day ultimatum is sure to irritate Israeli leaders, there's an understatement, who appear to have lost their patience with the Biden-Harris administration. As you'll recall, back in May, the White House paused shipments of 2,000-pound bombs and threatened to cut off other aid in an attempt to prevent Israel from entering Rafah in southern Gaza. Recently, whether it's their operations inside Lebanon or their expected retaliation against Iran, Israeli leaders have been increasingly keeping the Biden-Harris administration in the dark on their plans. We should note, however, that this threat from the White House could all just be political theater ahead of the U.S. presidential election, in an attempt, essentially, to appease young progressive Democrat voters in swing states who oppose America's support of the Jewish state, as well as, of course, the Arab American voters. Now, I know I sound cynical, suggesting that the White House might be making foreign policy decisions based on domestic political maneuvering. I'm sure that would never happen. Okay, next up, a new report from Microsoft reveals that Russia, China, and Iran are enlisting criminal hackers in a rapidly expanding cyber offensive against the U.S. and its allies, launching millions of attacks daily. I did say millions of attacks daily on military, government, and election systems. Authoritarian regimes are increasingly outsourcing cyber operations to criminal hacking groups, offering them protection in exchange for their services. This allows governments in Moscow and Beijing and Tehran to increase cyber attacks with fewer resources, while cybercriminals profit under state protection. National security officials warned that this partnership blurs the line between state-sponsored cyber warfare and criminal activity. Microsoft's July 2023 to June 2024 Digital Threat Report emphasizes over 600 million daily U.S.-targeted phishing campaigns, malware attacks, and system breaches by state-backed hackers. Now, let me repeat that. Over 600 million U.S.-targeted phishing campaigns, malware attacks, and system breaches by state-backed hackers. Russia has been at the forefront of cyber operations, focusing heavily on Ukraine, of course. Moscow's cyber attacks aim to disrupt military operations while spreading disinformation to erode support for Kyiv among its allies. In June, investigators discovered a Russian criminal network had hacked into over 50 Ukrainian military devices, seeking intelligence to aid Russia's invasion efforts. Ukraine is fighting back in cyberspace. Just last week, a Ukrainian cyber offensive took several Russian state media outlets offline in a counterstrike. Beyond Ukraine, Kremlin-linked cybercriminals target the U.S., using disinformation campaigns to sway public opinion ahead of the November 2024 election. The hackers have been linked to widespread efforts to spread false information through fake websites and social media accounts. Iran, they've adopted a more direct approach to meddling in the U.S. election, with regime-aligned hackers reportedly targeting the campaign of former President Trump. In one attempt, hackers tried to leak information from Trump's campaign, reaching out to Democrats in hopes of stirring controversy. That was an effort that ultimately failed. The Iranian regime has also been linked to efforts to fan the flames of American protests related to the ongoing Gaza war. Additionally, Microsoft uncovered a hacking group tied to Tehran that breached an Israeli dating site, seeking to embarrass Israelis and turn a profit through ransom demands. China now has largely stayed out of the U.S. presidential race, interestingly focusing its efforts on congressional and local elections. That's much more of a long game, as you might expect from them. Microsoft's report reveals that Beijing is targeting election systems while also directing cyber operations in Taiwan to undermine political stability. A spokesman for China's embassy in Washington dismissed the Microsoft report, there's a surprise, labeling the allegations groundless, conversely accusing the U.S. of spreading disinformation. It's important to note that although Russia, China, and Iran are utilizing similar methods, Microsoft's report found no evidence that these states are sharing resources or collaborating with the same criminal networks. With less than 20 days until the election, and it just can't get here soon enough, can it? Federal authorities are scrambling to counter foreign cyber threats. The problem is, as attacks, groups, and efforts are identified and targeted by authorities, well, new ones quickly emerge, making it a relentless game of cyber whack-a-mole. All right, coming up next in the back of the brief, an internal Border Patrol memo reveals that nearly one-third of surveillance cameras along the U.S.-Mexico border are not functioning. I'll be right back. In today's back of the brief, nearly one-third of surveillance cameras along the U.S.-Mexico border are not operational, obviously hampering border security efforts. An internal memo from the U.S. Border Patrol reveals approximately 150 out of 500 cameras stationed on watchtowers are affected due to technical issues and outdated equipment. The remote video surveillance systems, first installed in 2011, 13 years ago, are designed to monitor vast stretches of the southern border without requiring a large physical presence from Border Patrol agents. Now, camera systems that are over a decade old, yeah, I guess that sounds about right. The current malfunction of nearly 30% of these camera towers raises serious concerns among border security officials, especially as the U.S. continues to face challenges related to illegal immigration and border enforcement, and you may have heard about those challenges. The memo obtained by NBC News attributes the problems to a mix of, quote, technical issues and, quote, outstanding repair requests that have persisted for some time. Some fixes have been conducted this month. Well, that's good news, but there are still over 150 cameras waiting to be brought back to life. Border Patrol agents are expressing growing frustration, I'm sure they are, with the situation, telling NBC that they are operating with a huge handicap as some of the areas of the border are completely blacked out to agents due to the faulty cameras. Hector Garza, president of the Border Patrol Union in Laredo, Texas, emphasized the severity of the issue in a Facebook post, saying, quote, numerous officer safety and border security concerns arise from these malfunctions. While the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, is responsible for maintaining the camera systems, it's struggled to meet the demands of Border Patrol, exasperating delays in repairs. FAA personnel are reportedly dispatched to the southern border now to address the situation. And, I guess because I'm a glass half full kind of fella, let's end on a positive note here. Despite these technical difficulties, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, reports that the number of migrants crossing into the U.S. illegally did drop to its lowest level since President Biden took office, with August apprehensions falling below 54,000. Of course, well, that doesn't include the known gotaways, or those entering through the CBP One app, or those entering under the special exemption for certain countries. Well, damn, there goes my positive ending. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Wednesday, 16 October. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And, as you may have heard on the grapevine, to listen to the show ad-free, well, become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by simply visiting pdbpremium.com. It is really that simple. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, well, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool. Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.